Definitely. I mean, I got that statement from Tricia McLaughlin, and I will say this is faster than what we would have seen in previous administrations or from previous fatal incidents involving law enforcement. Often there would be a long investigation before this kind of information would come out. But in these incidents where we have seen ICE firing, as we did in Chicago, into a man's car, and another incident that was similar, we get details very quickly from DHS oftentimes before we can actually reconcile that with what we're hearing on the ground. And I know some witnesses on the ground that you've been speaking to, as well as witnesses who have been on social media, have said that this was someone who was attempting to flee from ICE. So while we're still getting all of those details together, what DHS is saying is that this was an ICE officer who was basically fighting for his or her life and that had to fire these shots into a car to keep this driver from coming forward and ramming officers and impeding this operation. Again, more details we're hoping to get. But this is not the first time that we've had incidents of ICE claiming that someone is ramming their vehicle. And as you stated, we're seeing this number, 8,000% increase in death threats. There's no raw data to accompany that, although we have definitely heard of more protesters, more people who gather as they surge operations in places like this. Let's also just talk about what's changed in Minneapolis since Sunday and what's changed today. As we reported, there are more than 2,000 ICE officers that came to Minneapolis as of Sunday. They joined those who were already on the ground doing increased operations that began earlier this month. With the 2,000, that included people who were doing investigations into fraud that followed those claims that have largely been debunked by Minnesota state agencies claiming that Somalis were behind daycare fraud, that they were getting money fraudulently. So they sent HSI agents to also begin investigating possible fraud in Minneapolis, as well as 1,500 deportation officers. And then today, Border Patrol became part of this. Border Patrol was involved in Chicago, Los Angeles, Charlotte, and most recently New Orleans. And they are known to use some more aggressive tactics to do wide sweeps. ICE has not been involved in many of the incidents that have gone viral when it comes to shooting into car windows, when it comes to basically taking people out of cars, and when they've been going after protesters. A lot of those videos that you've seen previously across the country, those incidents, that has involved Border Patrol. This involves ICE. ICE is by and large more trained in how to handle operations in major metropolitan areas, how to handle protesters, not something the Border Patrol would typically encounter when they are stopping the traffic that would come between legal ports of entry and more remote areas along the US Mexico or US Canada border. And so this is a more rare occurrence that we would see from ICE. But in this case, DHS is very clear this was an ICE officer involved shooting. They did not specifically say in the statement that this was a shot to the face, although that is very clear from what you all have been picking up on the ground, and that they say that this person is deceased, which goes against some of the earlier statements coming from eyewitnesses that said this person may have been taken to the hospital for medical care. At this point, they're clear this person was deceased. It also seems that there were at least some injuries, perhaps only to one, perhaps to multiple ICE officers, but they say that those people are expected to make a full recovery. So these are the details as we know them. Of course, we'll continue to push and learn more, but it's coming at a time of escalating tensions in Minneapolis. And you saw in the end of that statement, they are blaming sanctuary policies. And this has been a continued feud between this administration and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, where they're blaming him not only for fraud that has been committed in the state, although that fraud was also investigated under the Biden Justice Department. And Governor Walz has asked for more resources from the state legislature to crack down on fraud. They're blaming him for that, as well as for immigration in the Minneapolis area. And they blame the sanctuary policies that have led to more immigration. Of course, that sanctuary policies have nothing to do with why someone may show up and protest an issue or an incident like this where they're taking operations. We also don't know for sure. They're saying this was a protester. Doesn't seem this was someone they were trying to target with an arrest, but that this person was actually protesting is what they're saying. So again, as we get more details, we will let you know.
And Julie, I have just one question for you. Again, if you could just reiterate, it stood out to me when you said that ICE is trained for more of these situations. The Border Patrol, you say, is not. And we do have Border Patrol agents here in Minneapolis just as of recently. Can you elaborate on that again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for both Border Patrol and ICE, they go through extensive training. They are told that they can stop people based on a reasonable suspicion and arrest them based on probable cause that they're violating the country's immigration laws. But I've been in ICE training where they practice things like what to do if they're going into an apartment building where there are children involved, how to tell people to take care, how to make sure a child is taken care of if a parent is arrested, how to de-escalate, just as local police would be trained, and also what to do really to be able to tell the difference between when life is being threatened versus not. Border Patrol, of course, does get some of that training too, but by and large, based on the time I've spent, many years spent doing ride-alongs with the Border Patrol and ICE more frequently encounters this kind of situation as they operate in major metropolitan cities and areas, whereas Border Patrol typically is in more remote areas where they may be doing rescues of someone who has gotten into a life-threatening situation as they try to cross the border. So just delineating the differences between these agencies, and also that a lot of the issues that we've seen previously, other videos that may raise questions about who's being arrested, who's being targeted, and why, and if rights are being violated,
Right.
especially when there are people being pulled out of their cars. That typically has been Border Patrol, especially from what we saw in Chicago in October.
So, Julia, first of all, thank you so much for your perspective and your in-depth reporting on the facts here. It is indispensable to us in our coverage, and we're grateful for the partnership. Second of all, my question to you is about how many people have been arrested. You have Operation Metro Surge, right? It's ICE enhancing the operation in the Twin Cities here. And Secretary Noem had a Fox News interview, I think on Tuesday, it was yesterday, where she said that more than 1,500, quote, more than 1,500 crooks and creeps, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and gang members, end quote, have been arrested as a part of this siege. The problem in saying things like this is we have no check and balance on that. We don't know who they're arresting yet. We don't know the crimes that they're accused of. We haven't seen the warrants. So it's difficult for the public to just take her word as it is without double checking it. What are you seeing on your end with investigating how many people they're arresting and who they actually are?
Well, I can tell you the difference between when we get those numbers very quickly, as we did from Secretary Noem, as I heard today from DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin, roughly 1,400 so far had been arrested in the Minneapolis area, going back to when ICE began immigration-related arrests there earlier in December. But what happens later is we're able to, through sourcing and through data that we try very hard to obtain, it's not readily publicly available, as we try to get breakdowns on who had criminal convictions. And based on national data over 2025, since Trump first took office through really the end of that fiscal year, so getting into October would have been the cutoff. But of the people who were arrested between January 20th and October 1st of 2025, roughly 1/3 had absolutely no prior criminal conviction, 1/3 had pending criminal charges, and about another third would have had criminal charges. And so that does paint a picture of just how broad this has become. Trump came into office under the promise to arrest the worst of the worst, and often the people that Americans are witnessing being arrested and taken away don't seem to fit that description. Their only crime may be being in the United States illegally, which is a civil violation, not even a crime. It is, of course, a crime to cross the border illegally, and the United States has the right to arrest and deport anyone who has overstayed their visa or is in the country illegally. But there are paths to avert deportation, such as the asylum system. And we've seen time and time again, people show up thinking they're following the process they're supposed to follow, going to court hearings, checking in with their ICE officers, and instead their cases have been cut off at that point, dismissed, their case for asylum, and they're arrested at that point. That's another way that these numbers are often boosted. And then I will say, just because someone is arrested doesn't mean they're deported. ICE and Border Patrol have both arrested people where they find that they are American citizens or that they do have a legal pathway that they're pursuing to stay in the United States, and they end up being released, which is why deportation numbers often are much lower than the arrest numbers. So sometimes there can be a big splash in a community, but the actual numbers of those who are eligible for deportation are much smaller than those who are arrested.
Right.
Yeah.